Money makes the startup world go round, and in today's show, money will be flowing. Wow, hold off just a minute. Don't send me your bank details. If you want to find out or gain some money from me, well, you're going to have to wait until the end of the show. In fact, this morning, I've been working with a startup to submit a bid for Innovate UK so that we can raise funding. So my eyes are all in money, pound signs, in addition to spreadsheet rows, timeline, Gantt chart, you name it. But why is it relevant? Well, in today's show, we will be looking at money and how does it affect the startups ecosystem this year. Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Business live show. I'm Makangu, your host for the day, the founder of Athena Leaders, an organization that is passionate about helping startups dream, build, and play, whilst at the same time leaving behind the legacy of a happy and productive workplace playground. For those who have been following me for a while, you know the rules, right? We're here to have fun, play, and connect. So if there's anything you want to say, anything that resonates with you, then please use the comments. Hey, you might as well start off by letting me know where you are in the world. The second one, very important. We are looking for experts and startups to come on the show. And in fact, based on my experience this morning and the fact that we're going to be talking about money, if you know any bid writer or any investors out there that would like to come on the show and help startups throughout their journey, then please let me know. And rule number 3, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. So in today's show, we're going to look at 3 articles and 3 main thoughts. As I mentioned before, of course, it's going to be about money, but then we can see the impact it has on startups and what can we take out from that information today. So we're going to look at the startup ecosystem in the UK and how it's changed even during the pandemic. We're going to look at ways some companies are I think it's going to be innovative, the way they are trying to retain talent, especially tech talents that's really hard to find at the moment. And we are going to close by looking at hybrid working. Might not be related to money straight away, but if you're not careful, well, it costs a lot of money to recruit new people. So that we're going to look at what's happening in that space as well. So let's look at the first article, tech startups raising funds. Now, it's actually very interesting because, as you know, the C word, by that I mean COVID C word, doesn't need any kind of introduction. When it first happened, it really changed the startup land in terms of, funding and raising startups. A lot of companies were not really sure about what to do, as well as investors. All of that, could have been, it's understandable. But then something extremely exciting for startups owners and even people who are thinking about starting their own businesses. Money is flowing again. And what is also quite incredible is that the UK is working really hard on becoming one of the best startup ecosystem in Europe. In fact, what we found is that last year alone, the amount of money that was put into startup more than doubled. It was 11.5 billion pounds in 2020, and 2021, it was 29.4 billion. So if you're out there and thinking about starting a new idea, or you are in a startup and wondering whether it's worth going out for investment, then I would say, what are you waiting for? Go for that. When we start looking at the European ecosystem, the same story is happening as well. So 89.5 billion pounds were invested at the European level. And that means 14.7 billion were invested in Germany and 9.7 in France. So again, if you are in Europe and you're thinking about starting up, please do start looking at investments and your investment strategy. What is also exciting is that the level of unicorns, those are startups that really grow rapidly and scale rapidly, the likes of Starling Banks. I'm sure a lot of people by now know Starling. And if you are quite interested about unicorns and you want to see a great example of a disruptive company, then I will suggest that you go and look at that. Another thing that's also very interesting when we start looking about money from the perspective of a startup founder and owner is the fact that the boom is not just localized to London. What I love about that is when you start thinking about the fact that more other regions are also benefiting from that, then there's an expansion in that region, and it also helps in terms of recruiting, right? So if you look at the 29 unicorns that were created last year, then 35% of those were based outside of London, and even in areas such as Cambridge, Manchester, Edinburgh, Leeds, Newcastle, and Cardiff. In some of those towns, especially Cambridge, you might expect that, but others, you can see that there's a growth and a shift that's happening in those regions as well. This is quite exciting, not just for startup founders, but for anybody that's going through the wave of the Great Resignation. We talked a lot about that at our show last week, and we talked about transitioning into a tech career and what it entails, what you can do to deal with the learning curve, coding bootcamp, and more. So if you're out there or you know someone who's thinking, maybe I should look into startup world, then I will definitely say this is the moment for you. And if you're thinking about not just startup world, but entering into tech, well, think about this. One of the biggest challenges of the startups, despite getting all this investment and everything, is actually finding the right talent, and especially finding tech talents. It looks like there's about 50% increase in job vacancies in the UK alone compared to last year, right? That's a huge number. Over 160,000 people, 1,000 jobs are available for tech. It doesn't just mean development, engineering, which of course is one of the one that's in demand the most, but anything in the ecosystem. So as I said before, if you are recruiting in a startups, then I suggest that you start thinking about hybrid working, which will be looking into that so that you can attract talents throughout the country. And if you are someone looking for a new role, wanting a career change, then yes, think about going to a startup. And that's it for the first article. Now we're going to look at the second one, and which again, we're going to continue with the topic of money. Who doesn't like money, right? In the meantime, if you have any comments or if you have been following me for a while, I do suggest that you subscribe, that you like, and you share. And as I've said before, as we are talking about money, there's many startups out there that are looking for money, right? So if you know any investors or anyone who works in bid writing and would like to come on the show for an interview, I'll be more than happy to dive into more details so that we can help the startup ecosystem. Now, let's look at money. One question for you. If your employer or the company you work with were to give you $5,000 or pounds or whatever currency to leave your job, will you take it or will you stay? This is an approach that the CEO of a company called Trenial, a guy called Chris Ronzio, is using this strategy to actually incentive people to either leave the company if they are not a great fit or to stay. Now, you're kind of thinking, right, this is really outside of the box. When we talk about ideas and ways of keeping people in a company, especially when we look at the startup world and the tech world, is usually about free food. You can play video games in the office, and all those kind of things. And if you are at one of the amazing Google's offices or the likes, you might even have a nap room, right? I mean, me and a siesta, well, that's something I would definitely love. But paying people to actually leave your company, not to stay. People are not being paid to stay. They are being paid to leave the company. Now, if you look at the article in more details, and it actually make me think about some of the positive and negatives, but also I was kind of admiring Chris's idea really about why you want people to leave. One point that he makes, and that's really, really important, it takes a long time to onboard new people. I'm not even talking about the recruitment process in general. But if you have someone in your company and that will leave in 2 months, 3 months, or maybe 6 months to a year, especially if there's a lot of complexity, and especially in tech, depending on the code base and how much time it takes to learn, then you're actually losing money, because then you have to do it all over again. And in fact, this reminds me of one of the companies I used to work for. I started my career as a software engineer for Siemens Industry Software in Cambridge. And in fact, it was great. I was working on C++ code base, but it was a legacy system. And by that, for those who are not in tech, it means it's something that's been, I mean, people have started working on that software for many years. I think I was probably nappies when they first started, which means that the code base that I have to work with was quite large. And so whenever you innovate and there's an amount and millions of lines of codes, the complexity of what you're building gets increases. In addition, it was a computer-aided design software, which as well has its own complexity, maths and other things. One thing that, from my own experience, one thing that the company was really conscious of whenever they were hiring was the fact that it will take up to 2 weeks to 2 years to be fully capable as an engineer. Of course, you can start and fixing bugs, you can start and make decisions within the first 6 months to a year, but to really feel the autonomy and say, yes, I understand my area of responsibility inside out, took a really long time. So imagine if someone coming into the organization, stay for 6 months and feeling like, I knew from the beginning this wasn't really my place, but I'd stay anyway. And then in 6 months they leave. Well, the company will have to start from zero. So Chris didn't want that, right? Chris Ronzio wants people who, if you want to stay, we pay you to leave. And what he sees as well is that if someone decides to stay and turn down money, then they are more committed. They agree with the culture of the company, which gives them more chances of staying in the long term. What's funny about this story is that when he first started using this strategy, he was giving only $2,500, which is quite a lot already. But they thought, not so much for, especially for engineers who can earn 60,000 above. So he decided to up the amount he was giving out to 5,000 and see how it works. So I'm asking you again, how do you feel about being paid to leave a company? Would you take the money and go, or would you stay? And if you are a founder out there or a business owner, would you use this strategy and actually, would you use this strategy to incentivize your people to stay or not? Well, if you want to find out other strategy on how you can get your people to stay without spending $5,000, please keep watching. I've got a couple of thoughts for you at the end of the show. That leads us to article number 3, working from home, hybrid working, these all things that we have been talking about for what feels like an eternity right now. But then let's start looking at some of the issue that is coming, the issue that we are dealing with as a society. Personally, I love hybrid working. I even love remote working. But I have to admit that when it comes to the way it's being implemented in other organizations, it could be harming people than bringing more goods. And I guess this is the way this article was looking at it. It wasn't really about the fact that hybrid or remote working wasn't the right thing to do, but it was just looking at the impact it could have in an organization when not done properly, and also looking a bit at the society as a whole and some of the changes that have been introduced ever since. Now, what was interesting, based on a study that was done in April 2020 by the National Statistics in the UK, they found that despite the fact that we talked a lot about hybrid working and a lot of companies are going in there, it took front covers of so many newspapers. One thing that I didn't even realize, which I thought was quite interesting, is that only 46% of the population of the organizations are actually the population that had the ability of going hybrid. Now, this could be based on many different things, not just the organization, because obviously at the time we were under lockdown in the UK, but it was also based on the type of roles they were doing. There are some jobs that are not suitable for hybrid working. And I guess what the article was saying was really highlighted some kind of inequalities that could be introduced through the form of hybrid working and what companies and organizations can do to start balancing them out. They've highlighted things like giving people more flexibility. Maybe it could be by choosing their working hours, not just working from home, which could be limiting for those who do not have the capability of working from home. And they've also looked at the different regions, finding that more people around London, 57% of Londoners were able to work from home more than people in different regions. And again, it depends on the region and what is the main industry in the region. That also affects whether people can work from home. One of the things I wanted to highlight, which again, when we start talking about inequalities and the new pressure that we are finding in societies, is really about how the control society that we are slowly entering, the tracking and controlling, right? And yes, sorry, I was laughing there because every time I said the word tracking, my brain just goes track and trace. But yes, so what has it got to do with hybrid working? Well, first of all, there's this feeling that some people cannot be trusted when they work from home. So we need to track them and making sure that we understand what they are doing. There are more software that are coming out in the market and some other being developed. Again, if you've watched what's going on in startup world, you will see there's a lot of investments is going into applications that are based to track what people are doing so that they can report. But of course, whenever there's a great intent on an application, there's always something that can be used in a different way. One of the slightly negative ways is tracking whether someone is not working on his computer by checking whether the mouse or the keyboard hasn't been used. Well, if you're going to do that for me, you'll find out that I might not be working as much as you think I'm doing because, well, I'm still a paper and pen person, for example, right? So I'm writing down certain things. Or maybe people think that if your job is, let's say, call center based and there's a lot of metrics, yes, how about tracking and making sure they're doing the work the right way? Now, the reason why I'm not a fan of that is, for those who have seen me for a while, you know how much I talk about trust and I talk about empowerment of the team. And I believe that those practices might actually harm the trust, the empowerment within an organization rather than help it. So I don't believe that giving people $5,000 will help in this situation to improve the productivity. But I believe that there is a lot of work to be done in organizations to see how to increase the productivity in organizations with their people without actually tracking them. One thing I love about this aspect of hybrid working, there's so much more we could be saying about that, but I'm going to hold off on it. Why? Well, in February, I'm bringing to the show a fantastic woman called Darcy Bowles. I've been wanting to bring her in the show for so long. She's a future work thought leader, and I love her content on LinkedIn and her talks. And I thought it's going to be a fantastic addition to the show as we're going to look at hybrid working in February, and we're also going to look at the impact it does on startups. So there you have it, 3 of the main articles that we looked at. And today, we talked a lot about money and great news for startups. If you are looking for money, there's funding out there. And in fact, if you are investors, well, I'm also looking for money. I'm currently working with a startup that is actively fundraising. It's in HR recruitment tech. So if you are in that space and are looking for new startup that you might not have discovered yet, I suggest you get in touch with me. If you know someone who's in that space, tell them and let them get in touch with you. So we also looked at kind of how to incentivize people in your organization by giving them money to leave, not money to stay, which is very different, and also hybrid working and the inequalities. Now, before I go, here are my parting advice and 2 main things. I believe that creating a great culture is a really good way of helping people to stay in your organization. And if you are worried about some ways on how you could do that, and you are thinking about other ways of attracting new talents, then I would say, ask yourself this question. Does the culture of your organization, the culture that you show outside on social media, is that the same as the one that people live on a daily basis inside? One of the best way of recruiting, in fact, is actually word of mouth. if you have a great culture, and if your people feel empowered, they love coming to work, they love waking up, especially on a Monday morning, which is quite hard for certain people, then guess what? They're more likely to recommend, text their friends, passers by, and tell them about the roles that you have in your organization, and that could help you. Number two, design a happy and productive workplace playground. I'm not talking about just the fun, the free food, but really look at how you can structure your startup, how you can structure your organization, how you can structure your world so that people have the tools, the structure, the planning, the roles and responsibility. They know when they can be free, they can be empowered, but at the same time, they understand the boundaries and what they need to do. If you do that, then that will help create your culture, and that will help attract and retain great team members in your company. And for anyone who wants to try the strategy of paying $5,000 or however much you want for people to leave and it works, then please let me know. I would love to feature that in a future show. This was it for me. For anyone who loves this show, please remember, subscribe and like and share so that we can grow the ecosystems. And if you know anybody out there that might be wanting to come on the show, startups or someone in the ecosystem to help startups, then let me know. In the meantime, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.